Hello, welcome to the Brain Scrub, a somewhat improvised approach to mental health. My name is Glenn Sollers. I'm your host today, and thanks for tuning in. I was listening to a podcast a couple of days ago by a gentleman named Ryan Thomas, and Ryan Thomas is advocating for uniting families that might have gone through estrangement, alienation, and the reason Ryan Thomas is doing that is he was alienated from his father and realizes the mental health implications of alienation. And alienation or estrangement is essentially when a child or a family member decides not to see another family member or a group of family members. And the person who is doing the alienation, typically that's the person who's manipulating, brainwashing the child, is called the alienating parent, and the other parent is the target parent, and they're the ones that are being alienated from the child. Now, when it comes to alienation, I just have to say that this is a challenge, a mental health challenge, because it doesn't only impact the parent who's being alienated, it impacts the child who's involved in this alienation, and it impacts the extended family of that child because they all of a sudden become estranged or alienated. And if you even dig down a bit further, if you think about the person who's doing the alienation, they likely suffer from some mental health issues. Otherwise, why take a caring parent away from a child and that relationship with that parent? Because typically alienated parents don't have a lot of compassion, nor do they have a lot of willingness to problem solve, because ultimately they're trying to rid the child of that parent for whatever reason. The thing to know about alienation, there are cases where it is warranted. There could be physical violence, mental violence, abuse. Those are legitimate reasons to take a child away from a parent. However, in many cases, that's not what's happening. And sadly, the court systems in Canada, the US, and many other countries are not completely on board with alienation. It's a very complex topic. However, the challenge is that when we're dealing with alienation, it's important to be mindful that we're dealing with a child or children. And children typically do not have critical thinking skills until the age of around 19, 20 for females and around 24 to 25 for males. At that point in time, they can start understanding consequences and they can be more of a critical thinker. The judicial system, and it depends on the types of countries that you're in, some of them give the child a voice, like a strong voice at the age of 11 or 12, when they're likely not capable to understand the bigger picture in terms of what's going on. The reason I want to talk about this, again, is it is a mental health challenge. There are families that are getting divorced. There are children that are caught in the middle. And for many parents that have been alienated, they don't know what alienation is until it's too late, until the child is out of their life or virtually out of their life. Then one starts scratching their heads and saying, well, what's really going on here? And then it's kind of too late. So there's 8 signs and symptoms of alienation that I'm going to go through briefly for you. And the first one is a campaign of denigration. And that means that one parent is saying something badly about the other parent to the child or in front of the child to the other parent. So this could be things like, you only think about yourself. You can't be trusted. The child is not safe with you. Why are you doing that? They question your parenting. And the child starts believing this. And if you know anything about programming and reinforcing beliefs and confirmation bias, when a child hears this and then they see those particular actions from the other parent, it makes them realize that is true. There they go again. Oh my gosh, you're right, alienating parent. The other parent is unsafe. I can't trust them. I fear them. So that's a campaign of denigration. The other one is weak, frivolous, and absurd. absurd rationalizations for not seeing you. It could be, oh, I am feeling sick today, so I'm going to stay with my other parent because I feel better there. It could be things like, oh, I have homework to do. I can't see you. Oh, something has come up. I can't see you. Oh, you know what? You made fun of me or something the other day. Or, oh, my stepbrother did this or my stepsister did this. Whatever it might be, these are weak, frivolous reasons to justify not seeing the targeted parent. A lack of ambivalence is the other one. That's number 3. And that's really that they don't see any great qualities in the targeted parent. One parent, all good. The other parent, all bad. Number 4, the independent thinker phenomenon. And that is that when you see messages or hear words from your child or get emails from your child or texts that don't seem like they're actually writing it because it's not their particular language that they use. It doesn't have the sentence structure that they normally use. It doesn't sound like it's coming from them. That is a lack of independent thinker phenomenon. So you can tell that, you know what, something's up here. They're not writing this message to me. Somebody else is writing the message. Number 5, there is an absence of guilt, which means they don't feel bad about what you might be going through. Alienated parents suffer tremendously because all of a sudden the child is not there or doesn't want to see them. That does lead to emotional breakdowns. It leads to sadness. It leads to despair, a sense of desperation. And the child may not get that or may say, well, why on earth are you upset about this? So they don't have any feeling of guilt at all. They just don't see anything wrong. Number 6 is support for the alienating parent, which means that they talk about the other parent as a great parent. They support them. And an example of this could be when a child is dropped off by the person who's alienating and you're the target, that it might take a bit longer for the child to leave that parent. So an example would be, let's say a parent who's alienating is highly protective. And we all do what we do for a reason. We all have our history. We all have our programming. And there's things that we do. So it's really important to also have compassion for both parents in terms of what are they going through and how does that impact the child. Especially as a parent, you should really take a step back and say, well, how was I parented? How am I showing up with my child? What are the pros? What are the cons? And then deal with it. So let's say you grew up without a parent in your life for whatever reason. You may not see value in having another parent in your child's life. Or you may say, you know what, that parent left me. They didn't care about me. Therefore, that parent doesn't really add any value. So you don't know different. But you never experienced having both parents around. So some parents are highly protective of their children and they'll do everything they can to make sure that they are safe. And then the child hears these statements from their parent and they see the actions from the alienating parent. They want to support their parent like any good child would. They want to be there for their parent. They want their parent to be happy. So if there's a parent that's sad or they're scared or they're upset, the child might go to them and support them, but then leave the other parent out. Number 7, borrowed phrases or scenarios. And this would mean that maybe there is an event that took place, some sort of event, and the child will twist the truth to the alienating parent to make the other parent look bad. Or they'll jump to a conclusion. And this could be things like, they abandoned me. They shamed me. They were angry. And the parents and the parent and the step parent or whatever argued. So these different things are twisted around to make it seem like they're terrible things. Yet, every family I know, they do go through tough times. But the alienating parent might view that as, that's not the right thing to do. I need to get you away from that environment. It's causing you stress and anxiety. And they eventually do leave. The last one is rejection of the extended family. So it's not just the alienated parent that's being impacted, it's the family of that alienated parent, the extended family. because that child essentially wants to show the alienating parent that I support you and will do everything they can to ensure that they don't communicate with anybody outside of their parents' circle so that they can show them, I love you, I'm not going to leave you, I'm not going to put you at risk. The challenge here, and this was brought up in Ryan Thomas's podcast, is that generally an alienated child will favor the parent out of fear, and that is the alienating parent out of fear. And if you consider people who are in abusive relationships, many stick in these relationships for years because they're fearful of the other person. They're fearful of the consequences. And this is a fight, flight, or freeze thing. So it's a stress response. So in order for me not to be stressed out, I'm going to stay with you because by me maybe leaving, it's going to be far worse for me. And therefore, I'm going to stick to being with you and supporting you. Yet it's done under fear. What is the impact of this? Tremendous impact of this in their future relationships, how they deal with other people, how they deal with their future spouses and maybe their kids in the future. It has a huge ripple effect. And as well, they don't have those other family members around that they used to love, and as did the family members. So you all of a sudden lose these people, and you also lose an ability to work through problems. Typically, an alienating parent will kind of cancel out other people. I'm not going to see them. I'm not going to see them. Don't work out the problems. So they don't see two parents trying to work out their differences. That lack of communication and lack of problem solving can carry through to their future. Folks, if you are going through a divorce, or let's say you've divorced somebody and you have a child in the mix, here are some things to do. Number one is to set clear boundaries with the other parent. Set some rules, set some standards that both families will follow. Because if there are not mutually agreed upon boundaries and expectations, it's easier for a child to start picking sides. The other thing to be mindful of is that you stick to those boundaries. You stick to your custody arrangement. For example, let's say a child says, I want to stay at the other parent's house because I don't feel well. Instead of saying, go ahead, you can stay there, because what you're essentially doing is you're saying, you know what, they're the person that's going to take care of you, stay there. So you're discounting yourself, and you're discounting the fact that you're a great parent and you can also deal with a child's illness. So stick to the schedule, stick to boundaries. If you see a parent helicoptering in to save the child, so for example, you have a set of rules in your home, and then you decide, because when the child's in your custody, you have a right to make decisions about the child, and then the child contacts the other parent and says, oh, so-and-so's doing this, and then the other parent comes in and saves the day. That's something to put a stop to as well, because that's telling you that you are a bad parent and the other parent needs to be there to protect the child. That's not the right thing to do. Watch out for different signs, like if your child starts saying, you know what, I don't like it here, I'm scared here. Those are some messages you might want to dissect a bit further and then get a bit deeper into the facts. So, well, tell me what's going on here. What are the facts of the situation? What happened? Tell me, where did that come from? Be very inquisitive. Be willing to learn. If there are changes in temperament, or if there is separation anxiety, or it starts to become worse and worse around separation anxiety, be very mindful of what's going on. For example, if you drop off your child at the other parent's house and you just say, have a great day, I love you, I'm going to miss you, have fun, that's fine. But if you start crying in front of your child, or saying, I miss you so much, or you share this, oh, it's going to be so hard without you, I'll be sad, I can't wait to see you, or you contact your child constantly when they're with the other parent, the child is going to feel upset possibly. Well, that parent needs me there. They're upset that I'm going. And no child wants a parent to hurt. So make sure that if you see signs like that, that you deal with it and you set those clear boundaries, because a parent's action has a consequence on the child. The problem with a lot of alienation cases is that you're not dealing with somebody who's completely rational. You might be dealing with a narcissist, somebody who has a borderline personality disorder, somebody who maybe has some trauma that they haven't completely dealt with that shows up in the relationship between they and the child, or the child, the parent that's alienating, and the alienated parent. So there's a whole range of dynamics, but it's important to be mindful of, if you're seeing these signs, that you need to take action as soon as possible. Work through it as soon as possible, but know that the alienating parent may not want to work through it. So go to the courts, get a lawyer, make sure you deal with this from the start, because if you don't work things out, things can quickly get worse and worse and worse, and then eventually the child's not in your life anymore. And if all those signs and symptoms that I talked to you about earlier are present, then you may never see your child again. And that's a fact. That's called extreme alienation. So there's different levels of alienation to be mindful of. The good news is that people do grow up. And that maybe one day, if you're going through this or you're already being alienated, one day, hopefully you'll see your child. But the main thing is taking care of you. And we all play a part in how we parent and the challenges of parenting and the impact we have on children. We all do the best we can. I think that's important to know. And it's also important to reinforce with your children on both sides that both mom and dad are doing the best they can. We're trying to work through things. And to really manage the relationship between the co-parents there, to ensure that they are working through the issues, to ensure that, let's say a child does come to one of the parents and shares a story, that the other parent clarifies, is this really what happened? Versus 100% believing the child, because sometimes the child will twist the truth to the alienating parent out of fear or out of a desire to ensure that that parent feels good about themselves. And that's called codependency. And I've had an episode on codependency as well that you can review, which I think is a powerful episode. Folks, here's the message. Final message is to know that both parents, for the most part, want their children in their lives. And that if you create either a motherless home or a fatherless home, it has a ripple effect on that child. And know that they will carry these wounds forward with them. It is traumatizing to go through anything like that. If people can work together and start problem solving versus just removing another parent, imagine the message that we're sending to our kids. That, you know what, communication does work. Thanks for listening.